Hello, audience. This is our second hour show in which we're going to talk about the miracles in agriculture with my honored guest, Mr. Ron Smith, who is founder of Agri-Gro Marketing, Inc. in Missouri. And Ron, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Oh, I'm so happy. This is Ron Smith. He has pioneered the applications of foliar absorbents and natural fertilizers, and we're going to discuss all of this. But I'm very honored and pleased because we both met years ago as he was getting very active in the 80s with Agri-Gro, and it's been a number of years, right, Ron? And we've seen a lot happen in agriculture.
Many years. Dr. Hildy, many years. Good years.
Yeah, good years. And the decades have been kind to us, okay? We're going to be like Methuselah and that. But I would appreciate it if you'd tell the audience a little bit about the history of Agri-Gro, because it started so uniquely, and it had a very good foundation with yourself and your wife, Sue, and now it's going into the generational family who are running the business now, but it's a very good foundation there.
Well, Dr. Hildy, thank you for the opportunity of sharing with your audience and everything. I don't know where to start except to say that for me, the journey that's brought me to this place in my life started years ago whenever my father-in-law passed away with cancer at the age of 62, and was in the mid-70s. And so that's what started me on the journey to where I am today. And ironically, I met the guy that developed this formulation that we call Agri-Gro, and it has had a few, I would say, new generations added. We've been able to improve the efficiency of it and things of that order. But as a company, Sue and I started this in 1979. And just started it going out and talking to farmers about the needs to reduce their traditional inputs and use some of these so-called biological enzyme products to improve the soil tilth. And that's where we started back in 1979. Right.
And audience, what we're talking about is in the inputs, because if we look at the end of the 70s, that was, say, 1979, that was approximately 9 years after the development of Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and also our Environmental Protection Agency, and the FDA was present, and Department of Agriculture. But at that time, we had a lot of use of pesticides coming into the market because after World War II, there was these gases that were used and formulated into pesticides for the Federal Fungicide, Rodenticide, and Insecticide Act. And in this process, a lot of insecticides and man-made fertilizers, et cetera, were being put on the crops. The crops were losing their nutritional value, and also the soils were becoming polluted. And when you cross the path of the person who formulated your fermentation process, which was Dr. Joe Sproul, which I hope you get to share some insight about him, Ron, that it also brought, as Ron brought out, that you, in using their foliar absorbent for fertilizer, it allowed you to use less of the toxic substances, or not at all those substances. You as a farmer had a choice, and you could go more on the organic side of not using, harmful compounds or chemicals. But could you share a little bit about Dr. Sproul and how this whole process came about?
Well, this is going to maybe sound strange to some of your listeners, but Dr. Spruill was born in the early 30s. He had a heart condition himself at birth, and he passed away in the early 80s. In fact, I was honored to be a pallbearer at his funeral. We developed quite a relationship in the early 80s, but you know, the thing that he did, he stumbled into what we call a product that will help reduce excess uses of fertilizers and chemicals. And I qualify what I say, Dr. Hilde, because I'm not against fertilizers and chemicals and pest control and everything per se. I am definitely against the overuse of them. And as I sit here prepared to talk to you for an hour, I look at all the information I have before me that has taught me where I am to this stage in life, that the overuse of all these things is the problem.
Right.
And
the misuse.
Yes, misuse. Overuse, misuse. That's true, because you mentioned in your statement that these pesticides, what a lot of people are not aware of is that these are byproducts, the fertilizer that the greatest way of hiding a lot of these byproducts of the chemical industry throughout the world is into the fertilizers, because they're so little regulated. And that's ironic, but I have a piece of literature right here that started in May the 4th, 1986, and ended 1986 and ended May the 11th, a 6-part series. After that series was printed up in Iowa, they took that and destroyed all that information. I just happened to be smart enough to get several thousand reprints of it, and it talks about what the excess use of these things does to the water, and it affects our health.
Right.
My father-in-law ought not to have died.
Yeah,
Pardon?
It's not only what I was saying, Ron, it's bioaccumulative, not only in the environment, it's accumulative on the natural animals and flora that are there. Look what happened to Michigan with the pesticides and that runoff, where they had, 3-eyed or something toads or something a while back. Meaning there's all different kinds of things, and at the same time, it accumulates eventually. The runoff goes into the water, gets into the source, the public drinking water, or if you have your own well on your property, it gets into that. And we hear one horror story after another. And if it's a wise saying I heard from an Italian years ago when I went to Italy, is that do everything in moderation. So a lot of fallacy is that people think that pesticides or certain chemicals only affect the bugs that they're killing. They also affect you. And that's where it gets misused. Or you think the directions on the label is telling you to use this amount, but our cells, out of human nature, we need a little bit more. We just need a little bit more to make it better. And sometimes you don't. Less is better.
Yeah.
That way.
Well,
and I know you used to, before you go on, you used to give out a beautiful book, and I read it, The Pesticide Conspiracy with Dr. Bosch. I love that book. Audience, if you ever get that book, get it. And also, you also gave out a beautiful book on your company did to anyone that wanted it at that time when they were offering it, was on the minerals, and I can't think of the name of that book right now, but it was a wonderful book, and you learned about the history of the minerals in the ocean and fish and everything. It was wonderful, and that was always nice. Go ahead.
Go ahead. That book was Dr. Maynard Murray. He was born in early 1900s, but he quite like you say, it's about information, Dr. Hilde. It's about information,
right?
And
that was good. Yeah, because Ron and his company love to give out temples of knowledge, as I call it, books, and it's very good. Well,
I'd like for your listeners to know one thing. I am a farmer at heart. I married a farm girl. I was raised on a farm. My dad and mother moved us 4 boys from southern Indiana when I was young in the early 50s. And we was raised on a farm. We still live on a 1,000-acre cattle ranch, and we have about 1.5 miles of spring-fed river that runs through this property right now. And we do not use traditional fertilizer methods at all. We have less insects on our properties than our neighbors do. Our cattle and everything are much healthier. And so there is some benefits to going a more natural approach to agriculture. Not only in grasses, but we work with growers in on 6 continents in over 40 different countries. So we've been blessed.
Right. And this particular, and we'll share what exactly Agri-Gro is, and also its different versions of it that you have manufactured, like Agri-Cow, Agri-Kelp, etc., or Indigo, etc. But it has a basic foundation from it that was the first to bring out the enzymes, microenzyme inducers, and making the soil healthy with its own natural flora. Because I know Agri-Gro years ago, audience, participated with me when I got appointed by EPA Federal to be the toxicologist for the earthworm studies that were happening in Puerto Rico. And we learned a lot from those earthworms. They would eat anything in their way to and be healthy with their vitamin cocktail of Agri-Gro and kelp and another nutrient that we, Willard water at that time, used in that formulation. And they would be healthier because an earthworm would live 6 years. And they would eat all the lead or anything that was in its way just to get to that bacteria. And what was interesting is the castings, which is the waste from the earthworm, had no lead in it. So that's when Clive Edwards and a lot of experts in worms, earthworms in particular, started to look at the enzymes. But Agri-Gro and some of the other companies and myself were among the first to bring the knowledge of enzymes of the earthworm to the public. So it was nice at that time. Many years ago, right, Ron?
Many. More than 2 decades ago.
Yeah. It's been a long time.
But isn't it ironic, Dr. Hildy, isn't it ironic that something so simple as an earthworm, we think that they're lowly little creatures, but they're some of the most wonderful little creatures because what they take in and what comes out of them is totally different what comes out than what goes in. They are the earth purifiers, if you can keep them alive. But ironically, you can take traditional NPK, and for your audience, N stands for nitrogen, P, phosphorus, K for potassium. You can take traditional NPK, and you can touch one of those little prills, one of those little fertilized prills, to an earthworm, and that earthworm will immediately start writhing. In other words, wiggling. Oh, it burns his skin. Well, our material don't do that.
Right. And the audience don't realize that on the skin of an earthworm, there are at least 150 sensors, which are neurosensors, really their eyes, because an earthworm doesn't have an eye like we have. And the thing is that they get calcified and they wiggle, just like you said, and they come to the surface and bake in the sun and die.
Sure.
They're very, and that's why they were used in a lot of studies for neurotoxins and everything. But as you said, they keep the soil healthy. The more aerated it is, and I remember years ago you used to tell me, Hilda, just count how many earthworms you get in a scoop, a shovel of dirt after you use Agri-Gro, because you'll have more earthworms per scoop, which is true.
True. Absolutely.
Yeah, because they love it and that. So let's tell the audience a little bit about what Agri-Gro is as compared to I'm going to call it traditional fertilizers. By traditional fertilizers, audience, I'm talking about where you have a chemical in a bag, or in a fertilizer in a bag or a bucket, and then you're applying it to your yard or to your area.
To break it down to the simple first cause, Dr. Spruill developed a soup mix, if you would, of natural bacteria. It was a complete food source that he identified over 35 families of beneficial microorganisms, both aerobic and anaerobic. It takes both of those types of bacterium to balance things. And he was able to grow these by feeding them a certain diet, and then he found a way of growing to a certain stage over so many days, and then he found a way of stabilizing it whereby these bacterium would quit working and they would go into a dormant state, and we were able to encapsulate them and have a shelf life in our jugs of at least 4 years. It takes 4 things to make our product work: water, sunlight, air, and heat. And so when you have a combination of those 4 things in our product, you've seen the studies we've done in New York and the studies we've done in California, whereby applying our product to a soil medium will improve the microbiological life of that medium as much as 3,200% or more within 72 hours.
Right. And I know that that product was used in a lot of, I'm going to call it dead soils, where there was no nutritional value after some of the tragedies that occurred with different fungicides that were used on them in the 90s. Especially in the Florida and 46 other states. The thing is that your product was used in some of those test fields, I'm going to call it, where they were actually like closed because they could not produce because there was dead soil, meaning no life, no bacteria, no nothing in that soil, audience. And within a year of after application, and I think, I don't remember if it was 4 times a year you had to apply the Agri-Gro or monthly or something, but you can share with them what that time was. It totally turned it around to a healthy soil so that then crops could be used in that area, which was phenomenal at that time.
Well, it still amazes me, Dr. Hildy, as things that I witness at this stage of being in this for 32 years. I was out with some growers today even, and they said, "What are you working for?" And I said, "I'm not working. I'm enjoying what I do. I do what I want to do, and I enjoy sharing truth with people as I know truth." Right. And so it's a labor of love.
And you've always been that way. It's been great. And the thing is, though, with the Agri-Gro, because that was the main compound, the main thing that Dr. Spruill and your side, he developed, and then he passed away, correct? And then y'all ended up marketing it and bringing it to the growers and to the small nurseries. And I know that you have, because the Agri-Gro audience is made up of basically essential, as we stated earlier, micronutrients, proteins, enzymes, amino acids, and complex carbohydrates. These complex carbohydrates are from the possible encapsulation of their proprietary ingredient. But the thing is that it works so fast and so easy to use, and what I've always loved about it, it is not toxic at all, and as I call it, child safe, etc. And you never have to worry about it. It's just like you said, you could pour the Agri-Gro on the worm and it'll be nice and happy, versus in other situations with the nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium, as you stated, the NPK products, it tends to wiggle and squirm and can have hazards to its own health.
That's right. That's right. Well, we did a LD50 study, and our product, they said, was no more toxic than was distilled water. So that, and a lot of people listening say, well, if it's no more toxic than that, how can it work? Well, I'm not a chemist, Dr. Hildy. I am not a chemist. All I know that it does work.
Right.
Remember, your audience will chuckle whenever I say this. The Beverly Hillbillies, Jethro Bodine used to make me laugh years ago. He said, I do know how to deduct, you know. And I know that if I do something out in the field and it works where I've used my product, and the other way is not working, we've got an insect problem or a weed problem or less production, it's simple deduction. And we went into a lot of universities. The USDA has done a lot of work with us, and there's a lot of things that we're doing as a company. My three sons has really taken this business to a new level. We're grateful for that, and we've expanded our production facilities, and as we speak, our business is growing, and so we're grateful for that.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. The thing with Agri-Gro, when you apply it, you usually see the changes within a short time, a shorter growth period, don't you, Ron?
It helps speed up the metabolism of the plant. One thing that I like to tell people is that it speeds up the natural sugars that are available into a plant, and it's called BRIX, B-R-I-X. This is elementary to a lot of people, but your listeners, if they will think about what I'm getting ready to share, a plant has its own built-in mechanism if it's healthy. If it's not healthy, then it has a weakened system, and that's in direct relation to a word called BRIX, B-R-I-X. To those of you who want to go to a dictionary, check this out. You'll find that my words are true. BRIX is nothing more than a polysaccharide or a sugar reading. The higher the sugars goes in a plant, the less you see chewing, sapping, sucking, piercing type insects in and around that plant environment. Our product helps raise the natural sugar levels in the plant. They'll freeze less, and they'll withstand colder temperatures. In Florida, we'll withstand 2 or 3 degrees colder temperatures. We did a study down close where you used to live there in Central Florida, Dr. Hildy, and by the Mid-Florida Citrus Foundation. They lost 85% of their trees. Our grove, right across the fence line, we lost 15 to 20% of our trees.
Wow.
In the freeze. Well, I got pictures to prove it.
Right, right. And I hope we have them on our Vimeo so the audience can see it, because we've got a lot of pictures. Even the yield, you had beautiful pictures that we're going to have on the Vimeo, which shows these pumpkins.
Oh, yeah.
They're huge. I mean, one was, 600 and some odd pounds, and the other one was
670-something pound, I don't know.
And, close to 1,000 pounds. The other, it's huge. And they were called Fritz 1 and Fritz 2. So I thought that was interesting. But they were huge. You could make a lot of pumpkin pies with that.
That guy was along the interstate up north, and it was comical, but Sue and I met him, and the neatest guy, and he'd been raising pumpkins for years, literally years, until he started using our product. He couldn't raise any kind of award-winning pumpkins at all, but again, it comes back to the health of that pumpkin vine, The potential of crops is far greater than what we're realizing, but again, you got to feed it the right stuff,
Right. Have you seen, I don't know if the company, meaning your company Agri-Gro, has done a study or looked at that, but I did a little study here, meaning I grew some sunflower seeds, and they ended up being GMO-type sunflower seeds, because I've never seen a stalk grow like a corkscrew up from the ground. So I thought, boy, that was weird. But when I placed started to spray or, and apply in a watering can my Agri-Gro on them, instead of being a corkscrew, just like a corkscrew going into a bottle of bubbly of something, it straightened out, made a 90-degree angle, but it did do something. I thought, my word, I wonder what this does to GMO crops, because it was trying to get those ancient genes of that sunflower to come out right.
Hilda, you recall back in the 80s, we did some work with Harry P. Leau, Leau Botanical Gardens there in Orlando.
Yes, that's in Central Florida. Yes, in Orlando.
When Dave McAdams, he had a big nursery even in Mexico, but when he started using our product on some of the plants in that botanical gardens, we caused plants to bloom that had not bloomed for 50 years. Now, that's a wild statement, isn't it? But now that's what he said. Whenever a plant is getting the proper nutrition, it's amazing what that plant will do.
Right.
Its production cycle will extend, and it'll be much healthier and more resistant to disease and drought and excess waters. The roots will be better and all kinds of things whenever you got a healthy plant.
And it's like with those plants, because they didn't bloom in 50 years, it's like that plant went into a survival mode just to survive, not to bear its fruit or anything, meaning or its flowers, and then when it got the proper nutrients and in that nutritional setting, it bloomed, like you said, in 50 years. And that type of plant was not one that, was it an annual or a semi-annual plant normally?
Annuals.
Annual.
Even some annuals.
Yeah, so that's like having an azalea plant that's supposed to bloom in the springtime, as many forms, in down in the south of southern United States do. And hey, some of these plants didn't bloom, as you said, for 50 years. So, do you know what type of plant that was?
I do not recall. I knew I found it hard to believe myself where they told me, but you take people at their word, especially people that's orders more of your product based upon the performance of it and everything.
Right, and there's no reason to doubt it or anything, but I do know it even when early studies with John English in that time when he was trying to make natural lakes and man-made lakes where they had fish in it, where they were going black dead, from lack of oxygen, they would spray the water plants in that area, and there would be, and also into the water, and it generate a lot of oxygen. I know I've done studies that way, and the oxygen is, once that encapsulation blooms from your product, it generates a lot of oxygen.
It does that, for sure. That's one of the things Dr. Spruill talked about early on when I spent a lot of time with him sharing information with groups of farmers at meetings through the Midwest in the early 80s. So he'd always say it helps promote oxygen. When you have oxygen into a soil environment or a plant environment where the roots are growing, why, it'll absorb more water and it'll take less nutrients. And oxygen is so important. It's just like we as human beings, if our oxygen supply is being limited, well, we certainly don't have the energy to get out and do a day's work, or to till the garden or mow the lawn or even walk briskly. We don't have the energy because of lack of oxygen.
And that's happening. We did 68%?
No, I said at 68 years of age, I love to get out. I don't care if it's 100 degrees, and I love to walk, and I love to stay busy.
Right. Well, that keeps you young, Ron. And the thing is, though, in the first part of our shows on One Cell, One Light Radio, we did our second show was in reference to oxygen deficiency in America. And it's not, we were looking at humans, but this is oxygen deficiency within many aspects in our ecosystem. And the thing is that when you have a product that can generate oxygen and get that oxygen back and aerate the soil, thus allowing the natural, I'm going to say not predators, but the natural flora and animals, or like the earthworms, the insects of that nature in that field to prosper, your aeration and your growth factors within your plants tend to give you the higher yield, and the higher yield is being more flowers, audience, more fruit, more potatoes, more rice yield in many applications that were used. I know years ago you even used, they were spraying for the rice fields in Louisiana or around that area, and also noticed that there was a local crawfish facilities, and they had increased crawfish production because of the overspray from the Agri-Gro. So I remember that.
Well, what most people don't understand about the crawfish is just a freshwater shrimp is what it is. And my wife hates them. But at any rate, those things suck off of the dead rice stalk. They suck an algae. Our product promoted the beneficial algae in the water, and we enhanced the growth of the crawfish. It was amazing.
See,
we didn't know he was going to do that, but
no, you didn't know it, but you were observant like Jethro, so that you could
Jethro Bodine again.
That you saw the facts happening, and these yields not only in the crawfish. I remember in the early studies, these yields increased like 30 to 40%, at least in the first year, 30%, and then I'm going to say the plants or the seeds of those plants that were used on those, semi-annual crops, they would get healthier because they would have more nutrients in the seed, so that then they would grow better and prosper that way.
Let me read you something your listeners can listen to these figures. The rice research was conducted by the College of Technical Engineering and Agriculture in Vietnam. Where we used our product, we increased the panicles. In other words, that's what the grain eventually ends up on, these panicles that comes out of the rice shoot. We increased those panicles by 52%. We increased the dry biomass by 37%. We increased the root mass by 25% and increased the yield, the rice yield in this government research in Vietnam by 33%. Wow. And
I know, and Vietnam had so much problems with Agent Orange and all the defoliants that were used there that I know the more healthier the soil is, the less burden of those pollutant factors are there. So it's wonderful. And with this breakdown, like in with the algae and the protozoa or the rhizospheres that are in, certain feeding bacteria, you can generate not only the oxygen but the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, just to break down gases of the carbons. But I've noticed that in the production of the soil tests that were done years ago, it showed that there was an increase in the CO2 from the carbolic acid from the natural degradation of the plants because of that increased root mass. And you have some pictures that you sent in, the company did, of showing that expanded root mass. The more audience, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because you taught me a lot in agriculture next to my family. The thing is, the increased root mass allows you to have better storage of water within the plant. So when you have droughts and that you have you have shorter root mass when they're not getting the water.
So true,
And,
Dr. Brown.
Go ahead.
Dr. Brown in Arkansas grew soybean roots inside of a controlled environment, and they were 8 foot long, and he proved that as your roots are more abundant, the production of that plant is more abundant. Everything is in direct proportion to the root, because it, like you say, it can feed on more soil area, more moisture area, withstand more tolerance of excess weather or dry weather. So the root of the plant is so important. It's not that beautiful green stuff above the ground. It's what's below ground. That's where everything's happening.
Well, it's like they say, you can't judge a book by its cover, so you
That's
can't
true.
judge the plant unless you see those roots that way. Because I know with the healthier the grasses are, especially if you have grazing animals, whether it's goats, cattle, horses, whatever the grazing animal may be, because of that brick value being higher in sugar value and healthier, as you said, that there's less flies on their face or less insects because they're not generating the breakdown products from not having the right nutrition within the food source that they're eating.
Hilda, did my office send your people the picture of our ranch in 2001 of where we had an armyworm infestation in this part of the United States? It was so bad that it was coming out of the rice fields into the hill ground. We're in the foothills of the Ozarks where we are. We raise fescue grass, alfalfa, Bermuda grass, and that type of grasses. But in 2001, the infestation of armyworms was so bad that it was, for the first time in 50 years, it came into the fescue grasses. Well, we have pictures of our neighbor's field that just looked like they'd picked to the ground. There was no grass growing to speak of, and we had cattle belly deep in grass the same day, and we've got the pictures to prove it. In fact, Tim in the office, you've talked to him many times, Dr. Hilde.
Right. Yeah, I will make sure that we have those pictures for the audience to see. I know we had pictures of cows.
Phenomenal. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
And I remember when those, 50 years ago when those army worms came, because I was amazed as a kid. I was like, not even in elementary school, because we had property in Florida from my great-grandfather, and the whole hickory trees that he had on this area, it was covered in this like netting, which was the army worms. I was amazed as a kid how it just covered everything, and they made like tents. And my dad used to always tease me they were pitching tents, like in the army. But, it's
I heard
devastating.
It said,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I heard it said years ago that weeds and insects are the Creator's sign that something is out of balance in that particular environment. Because if your audience will think back, they'll notice that there's certain areas of their landscape or certain areas of a farm that'll have a certain kind of weed and another one over here, or a certain kind of insect will be in one part of a field and it won't be in the other, and it comes back to the health of the plant in that particular region. And again, it comes back to this bricks. Low bricks, high insect population. High bricks, low insect population. It's a fact.
Mhm.
It's a fact.
Now,
have you shared with your people? Have you shared with your people that they can contact your company and your health services and enjoy the benefits of the product?
Oh, no, I haven't. And audience, if you ever want to purchase Agri-Gro, either through Agri-Gro or through our company, Integrative Health Systems, please call or contact us through HildegardeStaningerReport.com, and we'll make that coordination, because I know Agri-Gro can be mailed anywhere within the world, and it's done phenomenal. I remember years ago in Georgia when they had the exploding watermelons, which was due to the gas breakdown of the fungicide that was used on them. And as the temperature would go up above 72 degrees and the humidity, these watermelons would explode. And I know that with the sweet crimson varieties in Tennessee, your product gave such certified results in over 243 watermelons per acre, which is a very high yield.
Almost 3 tons more per acre, and it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
a lot of money to the grower.
When you're looking at, because farming, whether it's a special niche farm or a unique crop that is done, or in larger acreage crops, the value is how much product you can get per that acre. And if you have the ability to get more per acre, that means more funds for you and your family to exist in your life and to enjoy life. So it's very important that way. Also, from the foliar absorption, the absorbent, the Agri-Gro, you also, the company made several other new products that are new to the audience, and at the same time good. Could you share with us, Ron, those like the indigo, and I can't remember the name of the one with the kelp.
It's the one with the kelp is called Agri-Gro Ultra, and it is a product that is certified organic. And then we have the indigo, which is a product that we formulate, and we use it in waste management, like in sewage and cattle operations, to help eliminate odor, break down solids and manures and everything, both human and animal waste. And
and that was so important, the indigo, in relation to breaking down that biomass of waste, because in particular in the United States, we had a lot of runoffs from hog farms and the odors, and also then chickens, et cetera. But chickens were more contained, not free range at that time, and but the hog runoff, et cetera. So these odors and also would get into the water sources. So when you developed that helped many agriculture and also waste treatment and the reduction of those biosolids in that production, so that many individuals that had the benefit of that product could reap the reward of not being out of compliance in biosolids.
We've helped dairy people come into compliance and everything with EPA because of it. But, there's a fascinating realm out there, because so many things that we do, how would you say, it tilts the balance of nature.
Right.
And we've got to be on an even keel with nature. We work with nature, she's going to work with us. When we get things out of kilter, we're going to have more disease. We're going to have less healthy plants. We're going to have less production. We're going to have crops that will rot in the field easier, or you get things in balance, and the strawberries are sweeter. They'll store longer. The watermelons are sweeter. There's just all kinds of positive things to be had where the plant is in a healthy state, grown in a healthy environment.
And when you have healthy plants, even these food crops that we as humans can consume, or the farmers can export, import, or sell to the larger marketplace, the thing is that even if these crops are used as feed for other animals, those animals are healthier from eating those foods,
absolutely.
as we learned in the earlier show. But it's absolutely healthier and prosperous. Also, before we went on to the radio, when I called you earlier to give you the number, Ron, I just told you I'd like to highlight, because you being in agriculture and coming from a farming family, in the last 32 years, you've seen many changes in agriculture. And where I'm going from is the changes being now that in third world countries, they're introducing in the agricultural community vaccines, meaning like you can get your polio vaccine from eating lettuce. My concern, from health and safety has always been, how do you know you ate enough lettuce? Or how do you know you're not buying the one with whatever the medicine? They're looking at this. What I'm saying is agriculture's come a long way from just being a plant. That's what I'm saying. And also with the new use, there's a lot of talk of using edible chips that are done within the seeds of these plants so that you know what the product is, or maybe you scan it or anything like that. What I'm saying is a lot has changed in agriculture, as with many of the things in the world. But go ahead.
A lot of people are not aware, and I have a book in front of me, and I would challenge anyone that is concerned about eating the best food that they can. I'm literally holding the book as I speak, and for those that will listen carefully, Seeds, SEEDS, of Deception.com. It's a book that anyone that wants to stay healthy ought to read, and it has to do with what is being used to grow our crops. And I did not write this. It has nothing to do with me as an individual or my company or my products. But it talks about genetically modified organisms in the seeds that is being planted, all the way from cotton to corn to soybeans to alfalfa and several other things. This is a serious, serious situation. Several countries throughout the world, I've been in New Zealand, and it is against the law to bring this type of a seed into the country down there. They will lock you up.
New Zealand has been very forthright in protecting the, I'm going to call it the organic nature of their country, and they have been it from, I'm going to call it day one. And it's been it's nice to hear your comment that way, because cross-pollination and a lot of things along that line really do affect with genetically modified seed groups, and also in the consumption of that type of food. Everyone says it's safe, but no one has any study on it either, too.
Hilda,
at this time.
You've known me long enough. I want to make a statement here.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in Mexico, down in the Sierra Madre Mountains, and I've done mission work down in that area. Took my product, given it to families, and I've been in one area down there. I was the 10th white man to ever be there. And I have seen the effects of some of these genetically modified organisms coming over to the mountains into these secluded valleys and polluting the corn that for hundreds of years was not polluted. And those people are really saddened by that, because they had no choice. But these genetically modified organisms can go awry. And like you say, the book I hold in my hand now, there's all kinds of studies that says it's not safe,
Right, so. And many of books and even the Bible says you can't mix, human genes with plant genes, or fish with the tomato, etc. And that's what we're talking about, audience. I've even heard from a colleague of mine that passed away years ago, Dr. Ghostwolf, where he was involved, not in the studies, but observed that where they had genetically modified wheat, when the wind blew, it sounded just like someone crying out there, like a baby. So you never know. We're living in a time where few of us know right from wrong, and sci-fi is everywhere.
Yeah. Well,
anything that you read about as a kid in the comic book, it's happening. Whether it's from movies like Face Off or anything, meaning it's happening. And don't think you cannot grow something in a jar or in a bottle. Meaning there's advertisements on the internet now that you can even do genetic stuff and grow it in your refrigerator. Some of these scientists do, and that's crossing different lines. But that's a whole other topic and a whole other show, which we'll have with Dr. Richard Young when we talk about different technologies out there. But the whole thing is, and I'm glad you brought that up, because maybe that's, I don't know what was genetically in those sunflowers, but I have never in my whole life seen a plant grow like a corkscrew up, and these are plants that grow 6 feet tall. So it definitely was modified, but it grew at a 90-degree angle, and I'm going to try to get those pictures that I made my daughter take so that we can have those on the show too. But the thing is, with Agri-Gro, since they're now in 6 continents, what's new at Agri-Gro, maybe?
Well, what's new is we are expanding. It's a joy. It's a joy to see the plans. We just leased another 30,000 square foot within 20 miles of where our present facility is until we can get more buildings. We've another 25,000 square feet in Minnesota, and it's just wonderful to be a part and see something, a dream that you had, a vision that you had come to fruition, and people happy and growing healthier crops and using less money to do it. And it's Hilda, I'm having more fun at 68 years of age now than I ever had when I was 18.
Good. I'm glad because y'all worked hard, Sue, and you worked very hard in the beginning, and I'm glad that your sons are taking over the business, because there's a lot of history there that is good history that they know, where all the studies were and everything like that. It was good times and blessed.
Let me share with your audience. We have a company out in Mexico that they took our product against 32 types of products over about a 5 or 6 years period. They tested those 33 products on 17 different crops with 15 different growers, and there was nothing that outperformed our product. So that kind of gives me a indication that we might have a very effective product whenever it comes to being number one as far as effectiveness and costing the least and producing the most. So we're great.
And hopefully, with the nutrients that are in Agri-Gro and its other products that are created with its base, that it may be God's answer to solving the corrections of genetic splice and dice, So I have full hope in that, and when I take money out, I'd bet on Agri-Gro. That way I always have, always will. I'm a Agri-Gro person.
You have been a very positive influence in that with your background, Dr. Hilde. You have been willing to look at results. There's a lot of people with your level of education that they refuse to look at alternatives. Wise people change their mind. Wise people keep their minds open. A fool closes his mind. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity of meeting you those years and years ago, and through the years we had a good relationship, and you've always been positive and truthful, and I think people that are close to you and know you are grateful for that. So
thank you very much. It means a lot to me. Thank you. Yeah, because you've known, you and John Willard have known me the longest out there. It's been many decades, audience, many decades, and they appreciated this little toxicologist.
Well, you've proved some things that everybody else talked about in theory. You've proven it, and whenever some of the things you've shared with me of people that you've worked with, that's the end results right there. I learned a long time ago, a guy told me back in 1976, he said, learn one thing, love people and use money. Don't love money and use people. I think you qualify on the first. You love people.
Oh, thank you.
So that's great.
I want to thank you. Ron, if you hear that music in the background, we're coming up to the end of the show. And I want to thank you for being on the show, and we're going to get those pictures up and show the difference in the armyworm and everything. Thank you a lot.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
All right.
And audience, please remember the contest. We have 2 chicken purses with nice, beautiful products from Grandma's Lye Soap. And the other thing is, remember, the first question is, what is the name of the most famous chicken that storybooks have been written about? It's a female. The second is, what are the names of the 2 pumpkins that Ron and I talked about on the second one? So you have 2 opportunities to win. The first 2 that get it, we'll make the announcement on the next show or whenever they come in with the answers. Thank you, and God bless. Bye-bye.
Informed, enlightened, alive and amplified. This is the Living Light Network.
For the Federal Fungicide, Rodenticide, and Insecticide Act. And in this process, a lot of insecticides and man-made fertilizers, etc., were being put on the crops. The crops were losing their nutritional value, and also the soils were becoming polluted. And when you cross the path of the person who formulated your fermentation process, which was Dr. Joe Sproul, which I hope you will get to share some insight about him, Ron, that it also brought, as Ron brought out, that in using their foliar absorbent for fertilizer, it allowed you to use less of the toxic substances, or not at all those substances. You as a farmer had a choice, and you could go more on the organic side of not using harmful compounds or chemicals. So could you share a little bit about Dr. Sproul and how this whole process came about?
Well, this is going to maybe sound strange to some of your listeners, but Dr. Sproul was born in the early 30s. He had a heart condition himself at birth, and he passed away in the early 80s. In fact, I was honored to be a pallbearer at his funeral. We developed quite a relationship in the early 80s, but the thing that he did, he stumbled into what we call a product that will help reduce excess uses of fertilizers and chemicals. And I to say that for me, the journey that's brought me to this place in my life started years ago whenever my father-in-law passed away with cancer at the age of 62, and is in the mid-70s. And so that's what started me on the journey to where I am today. And ironically, I met the guy that developed this formulation that we call Agri-Gro, and it has had a few, I would say, new generations added. We've been able to improve the efficiency of it and things of that order. But as a company, Sue and I started this in 1979 and just started it going out and talking to farmers about the needs to reduce their traditional inputs and use some of these so-called biological enzyme products to improve the soil tilth. And that's where we started back in 1979.
Right. And audience, what we're talking about is in the inputs, because if we look at the end of the 70s, that was, say, 1979, that was approximately 9 years after the development of Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and also our Environmental Protection Agency, and the FDA was present, and Department of Agriculture. But at that time, we had a lot of use of pesticides coming into the market because after World War II, there was these gases that were used and formulated into pesticides. Hello, audience. This is our second hour show in which we're going to talk about the miracles in agriculture with my honored guest, Mr. Ron Smith, who is founder of Agri-Gro Marketing, Inc. in Missouri. And Ron, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Oh, I'm so happy. This is Ron Smith. He has pioneered the applications of foliar absorbents and natural fertilizers, and we're going to discuss all of this. But I'm very honored and pleased because we both met years ago as he was getting very active in the 80s with Agri-Gro, and it's been a number of years, right, Ron? And we've seen a lot happen in agriculture.
Many years. Dr. Hilde, many years. Good years.
Yeah, good years, and the decades have been kind to us, okay? We're going to be like Methuselah and that. But I would appreciate it if you'd tell the audience a little bit about the history of Agri-Gro, because it started so uniquely, and it had a very good foundation with yourself and your wife, Sue, and now it's going into the generational of family who are running the business now, but it has it's a very good foundation there.
Well, Dr. Hilde, thank you for the opportunity of sharing with your audience and everything. I don't know where to start except qualify what I say, Dr. Hilde, because I'm not against fertilizers and chemicals and pest control and everything per se. I am definitely against the overuse of them. And as I sit here prepared to talk to you for an hour, I look at all the information I have before me that has taught me where I am to this stage in life, that the overuse of all these things is the problem.
Right. And the misuse.
Doctors, yes, misuse. Overuse, misuse. That's true, because you mentioned in your statement that these pesticides, what a lot of people are not aware of is that these are byproducts, the fertilizer that the greatest way of hiding a lot of these byproducts of the chemical industry throughout the world is into the fertilizers, because they're so little regulated. And that's ironic, but I have a piece of literature right here that started in May the 4th, 1986, and ended 1986, and ended May the 11th. A 6-part series, after that series was printed up in Iowa, they took that and destroyed all that information. I just happened to be smart enough to get several thousand reprints of it, and it talks about what the excess use of these things does to the water, and it affects our health.
Right.
My father-in-law ought not to have died.
Yeah,
Pardon?
it's not only what I was saying, Ron, it's bioaccumulative, not only in the environment, it's accumulative on the natural animals and flora that are there. Look what happened to Michigan with the pesticides and that runoff, where they had, three-eyed or something toads or something a while back. Meaning there's all different kinds of things, and at the same time, it accumulates eventually. The runoff goes into the water, gets into the source, the public drinking water, or if you have your own well on your property, it gets into that. And we hear one horror story after another. And if it's a wise saying I heard from an Italian years ago when I went to Italy, is that do everything in moderation. So a lot of fallacy is that people think that pesticides or certain chemicals only affect the bugs that they're killing. They also affect you. And that's where it gets misused. Or you think the directions on the label is telling you to use this amount, but our cells, out of human nature, we need a little bit more. We just need a little bit more to make it better. And sometimes you don't. Less is better.
Yeah.
That way.
Well,
and I know you used to, before you go on, you used to give out a beautiful book, and I read it, The Pesticide Conspiracy with Dr. Bosch. I love that book. Audience, if you ever get that book, get it. And also, you also gave out a beautiful book on your company did to anyone that wanted it at that time when they were offering it, was on the minerals, and I can't think of the name of that book right now, but it was a wonderful book, and you learned about the history of the minerals in the ocean and fish and everything. It was wonderful, and that was always nice. Go ahead.
Go ahead. That book was Dr. Maynard Murray. He was born in early 1900s, but he quite, like you say,